I watched through my security camera app in complete disbelief as my mother stood in my living room directing my father where to place boxes. "Once everything is here, she will not make a scene. She will just accept it," Mom said confidently. They were moving my 28-year-old unemployed brother Danny into my house while I was supposed to be on a business trip to Denver. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own parents had been planning this invasion of my home for weeks, assuming I'd be powerless to stop them once Danny's belongings were already inside. That was their biggest mistake. 3 days before my scheduled departure for Denver, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table for our usual Sunday dinner when my world turned upside down. I work as a senior software engineer at a promising tech startup in Austin, Texas, and I had saved every penny for 2 years to buy my beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman house in a quiet neighborhood near Zilker Park. The mortgage payments were steep, but the pride I felt walking through my own front door every evening made every sacrifice worth it. My brother Danny had been living with our parents since losing his warehouse job 6 months earlier. At 28, he had become a permanent fixture in their small 2-bedroom apartment, sleeping on their couch and spending his unemployment checks on video games and takeout food. Our parents, Susan and Robert, had been dropping hints for weeks about how cramped their living situation had become, but I never imagined they would resort to what I was about to discover. During dinner, Mom excused herself to grab her purse from the counter, and as she pulled out her reading glasses, several folded papers scattered across the floor. I bent down to help collect them, and my blood ran cold when I saw what they contained. Printed emails between my parents and reliable moving company dated from 2 weeks ago detailed the logistics of moving Danny's furniture gaming setup and personal belongings on Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Thursday was exactly 1 day after my supposed departure to Denver. I handed the papers back to Mom with trembling fingers, forcing my expression to remain neutral. "Thanks, honey," she said casually, tucking them back into her purse without a second glance. But my mind was racing, connecting dots I should have seen much earlier. The Denver trip had been Mom's suggestion in the first place. She had mentioned how my company really needed me there for client meetings, even though I could have handled everything remotely. Over the past month, my parents had asked increasingly detailed questions about my daily routine. Where did I keep my spare keys? How often did I check my security cameras? Did any neighbors have emergency contact information? I had answered innocently, thinking they were just being caring. Parents worried about my safety as a single woman living alone. Dad continued eating his meatloaf as if nothing had happened, but I caught him exchanging a meaningful look with Mom. The comfortable family atmosphere I had always cherished suddenly felt suffocating and deceptive. My stomach churned as I realized that every recent conversation, every casual question about my house, every suggestion about the Denver trip timing had been carefully orchestrated. "So Larissa all packed for your big trip?" Dad asked, his tone overly cheerful. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but something held me back. Maybe it was the calculating way Mom had quickly hidden those papers, or the practiced ease with which they were both acting completely normal. I needed to know the full extent of their deception before I made any moves. "Almost ready," I managed to reply, cutting my pot roast into smaller pieces to keep my hands busy. "Just need to confirm a few last-minute details with the hotel." This was a lie, but I wanted to see how they would react. "Oh, you should call them tonight then," Mom suggested quickly. "You know how these business hotels can be with reservations." Another red flag. Mom had never shown interest in my travel logistics before, and her sudden urgency seemed suspicious. After dinner, I helped clear the dishes while my parents settled into their usual evening routine of watching the news. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead slipped into Mom's bedroom and quietly opened her purse. My hands shook as I photographed the moving company emails with my phone, along with several handwritten notes I found beneath them. The notes were even more damning than the emails. In Mom's careful handwriting, I read a detailed inventory of Danny's belongings to be moved: gaming computer and 3 monitors bedroom set from garage guitar amplifier record collection, winter clothes, kitchen supplies. But the final note made my knees weak. It was a rough sketch of my house layout with room assignments written in red ink. Danny's bedroom, convert Larissa's office, Danny's entertainment area, living room corner, Danny's storage, hall closet. They had been inside my house. They had been planning this invasion room by room, deciding how to rearrange my life to accommodate my brother without asking my permission. The violation felt so profound that I had to grip the bathroom sink to steady myself. When I returned to the living room, my parents were discussing weekend plans with the same casual warmth they had always shown me. But now I could see the performance underneath. Every smile felt calculated. Every question felt like reconnaissance. Every expression of love felt tainted by their willingness to deceive me so completely. I barely slept that night, and by Monday morning I had made a decision. Instead of going straight to work, I drove past my house to check if my paranoid suspicions had any basis in reality. What I discovered there confirmed my worst fears and revealed just how deep this conspiracy actually went. My garage door was slightly ajar, which immediately set off alarm bells. I always kept it completely closed and locked. I parked across the street and pulled up my home security camera app on my phone. The image that filled my screen made me gasp out loud. My garage, which had been empty except for my lawnmower and gardening tools, now contained at least a dozen cardboard boxes stacked along the back wall. Each box was labeled in black marker with Danny's stuff, followed by descriptions like books and games, clothes, winter, and electronics. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely navigate the app to check the timestamp. The boxes had been moved in yesterday evening around 9 p.m., just 2 hours after I had left their house, following our Sunday dinner. While I was driving home processing the shock of discovering their emails, my parents had been implementing their plan. I called my best friend Madison, who works as a paralegal at a downtown law firm. "Madison, I need legal advice and I need it fast," I said without preamble. Within minutes, I was sitting in her office conference room showing her the photographs and security footage. "Larissa, what you're describing could constitute breaking and entering," Madison said grimly as she reviewed the evidence. "Even if they're family, even if they have a key, they don't have your permission to store property in your house or to make preparations for someone else to live there." The validation felt like a lifeline, but Madison's next words hit me hard. "The real problem is going to be once your brother actually moves in. If he establishes any kind of residency, even illegally, you'll have to go through formal eviction proceedings to get him out. In Texas, that can take months. As Madison explained the legal complexities, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Have a wonderful trip, sweetie. Don't worry about anything at home. We'll keep an eye on the neighborhood for you." The casual duplicity of that message, sent while boxes of Danny's belongings sat illegally in my garage, made my anger surge beyond anything I had ever felt toward my family. But anger quickly gave way to a deeper hurt as I began remembering Danny's history. He had dropped out of community college, twice quit, or been fired from at least 8 jobs in the past 5 years, and had a gambling problem that had cost him thousands of dollars he didn't have. I had lent him money 4 separate times over the past 2 years, totaling nearly $3,000 that he had never even attempted to repay. Each time he had promised it was just temporary help while he got back on his feet. Each time our parents had supported his requests, assuring me that Danny had learned from his mistakes and was really trying this time. Now I understood that their constant defense of Danny wasn't just parental love. It was part of a pattern of enabling his irresponsibility while shifting the burden of supporting him onto me. They couldn't afford to have him live with them indefinitely, so they had decided to make him my problem, instead using deception and emotional manipulation to force me into a situation I would never have agreed to willingly. Madison pulled up property records and tenant law on her computer while I made phone calls to verify more details. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived next door and had always been friendly. "Oh, yes, dear," she said when I asked if she had noticed any unusual activity around my house. Your mother stopped by last Tuesday and mentioned that your brother would be staying with you for a while. She said it was such a generous thing for you to do, helping family during difficult times. The scope of their deception was breathtaking. My parents had already begun telling neighbors and presumably other family members that I had volunteered to house Danny. They were creating a narrative that would make me look like a heartless sister if I objected to the arrangement after the fact. I spent my lunch break reviewing 3 weeks of home security footage, fast-forwarding through hours of recordings. What I found made my stomach turn. My parents had been entering my house regularly, sometimes together, and sometimes individually, using the spare key I kept hidden under a decorative rock near my front porch. I watched Dad measuring the dimensions of my home office with a tape measure, while Mom photographed my furniture arrangement from multiple angles. In one particularly disturbing recording from the previous Wednesday, I watched Mom open my desk drawers and file through my personal papers. She'd even taken photos of my utility bills and mortgage statements with her phone. The invasion of privacy felt so profound that I had to stop the video and take several deep breaths. The final blow came when I discovered a recording from Friday afternoon showing my parents in my living room with a notebook discussing logistics with the casual efficiency of professional thieves. "The couch can go against that wall to make room for Danny's entertainment center," Mom was saying, pointing around my space as if it belonged to them. "And we'll need to move her desk out of the office before the movers arrive with his bedroom set." But the conversation that broke my heart came next. Dad's voice was clearly audible through my security system. What if she really objects when she gets back? What if she threatens to call the police? Mom's response was swift and confident. "Then we'll tell Danny that Larissa changed her mind about the arrangement. She'll look like the unreasonable one going back on her word to help her own brother. Family pressure will make her back down." Tuesday morning found me calling my boss Jennifer from my car in the parking lot outside the office. My hands were still trembling from everything I had discovered, but my resolve was becoming stronger by the hour. "Jennifer, I need to cancel the Denver trip," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a family emergency that requires me to stay in town." Jennifer had always been understanding about work-life balance, and she immediately agreed to reschedule the client meetings for the following week. "Take all the time you need, Larissa. Family comes first." If only she knew how twisted my family situation had actually become. I spent the morning researching tenant rights and property law, diving deep into Texas statutes about unlawful entry and establishing residency. What I learned both terrified and motivated me. Madison had been absolutely correct about the legal complexities. If Danny moved in and started receiving mail at my address, if he could prove he had been living there for even a few days, evicting him would require formal legal proceedings that could drag on for months. My parents' plan was more legally sophisticated than I had given them credit for. By waiting until I was out of town to complete the move, they were ensuring Danny would have time to establish the basic elements of legal residency before I could object. It was manipulative, but it wasn't stupid. However, two could play this game. I called Reliable Moving Company and, using a slightly higher voice, identified myself as Susan Thompson, calling to confirm Thursday's appointment. The receptionist was happy to provide details. The movers were scheduled to arrive at 8 a.m. sharp to transport furniture and boxes from the Thompson residence on Maple Street to my address on Oak Grove Drive. Payment had already been processed in full. "Will anyone be there to supervise the move?" I asked, maintaining my fake identity. "Yes, Mrs. Thompson, you mentioned that your son and husband would be on site to direct the movers and that the homeowner would be traveling abroad for several weeks." Traveling abroad for several weeks. My parents had told the moving company I would be gone far longer than the 3-day Denver trip they had discussed with me. They were planning to give Danny weeks to establish residency before I returned to discover the fait accompli. My next call was to Austin Energy to check if there had been any recent requests to transfer utility services to my address. The customer service representative confirmed that someone had submitted a change of service request for Thursday afternoon, adding Daniel Thompson as an additional account holder for my property. The request had been made using my property deed number and what appeared to be a forged signature on a form submitted by mail. They were not only moving Danny into my house without permission, they were also committing fraud by forging my signature on utility documents. The criminal implications were becoming serious enough that I realized I needed professional help. Madison recommended a private security company that specialized in documenting property crimes and insurance fraud. Elite Protection Services had investigators who could provide legally admissible evidence of unlawful entry and theft. I arranged for a consultation that afternoon and explained my situation to the company owner, a retired police detective named Captain Morrison. What you're describing is a coordinated plan to illegally establish residency through deception and possible fraud, Captain Morrison explained. We can definitely help document the crime in progress, but you need to understand that family court judges sometimes view these situations as civil disputes rather than criminal matters. That's when I decided to take control of the situation completely. I would not rely on family court judges or lengthy legal proceedings. I would catch my parents in the act, document everything, and force them to face the consequences of their deception immediately. I arranged for Elite Protection Services to position surveillance teams around my house beginning Wednesday evening. They would document every aspect of the illegal moving operation while I controlled the situation from a safe location. Captain Morrison provided me with additional recording equipment and helped me upgrade my home security system to capture high-definition audio and video evidence. But I also made another crucial decision. I called a locksmith and scheduled an emergency service appointment for Wednesday evening. I would have all my locks changed and new keys made while keeping the old locks functional until Thursday morning. This would allow my parents to enter for their final preparations on Wednesday night, but their keys would not work when they tried to supervise the movers on Thursday. The psychological impact of discovering their keys no longer worked would be significant, but more importantly, it would force them to call me or attempt to break in, more obviously creating even stronger evidence of criminal intent. As I finalized these plans, my phone rang with a call from Danny himself. "Hey, Larissa, I just wanted to thank you again for being so generous about the living situation," he said, his voice full of genuine gratitude and excitement. My heart sank as I realized the full scope of my parents' manipulation. Danny actually believed that I had invited him to live with me. "What exactly did Mom and Dad tell you about this arrangement?" I asked carefully. "Just that you offered to let me stay at your place while you're traveling for work frequently over the next few months," Danny replied. "They said you have extra space and thought it would be good for both of us. You get someone to look after the house, and I get a chance to save money and get back on my feet properly." The lies were even more extensive than I had imagined. My parents had convinced Danny that this living arrangement was my idea, that I was frequently traveling for work, and that I wanted him to house sit for me. They had manipulated both of us using Danny as an unwitting accomplice in their scheme, while making me look like a generous sister who was helping family during tough times. "Danny, when exactly are you planning to move your things?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Thursday morning. Mom and Dad hired movers and everything. They said you wanted to make sure I was settled in before your next business trip." His enthusiasm was heartbreaking because it was so genuine. Danny truly believed our parents were facilitating a mutually beneficial arrangement that I had requested. That night, I drove to Madison's apartment with 2 suitcases and my laptop, prepared to spend the next 2 days coordinating the most elaborate trap I had ever constructed. As I set up a command center in her guest bedroom with multiple monitors showing feeds from all my security cameras, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger at my parents' betrayal, sympathy for Danny's naive trust, and a cold determination to expose the entire deception in a way that would prevent them from ever manipulating either of us again. But first, I had one more crucial discovery to make about just how long my parents had been planning this invasion of my life. Wednesday evening arrived with the weight of impending confrontation. From Madison's guest bedroom, I watched my parents arrive at my house through multiple camera angles, my heart pounding as their deception unfolded in real time. They used their keys, confidently entering through my front door at exactly 10 p.m. like thieves who had been casing the property for weeks. I had positioned my laptop to display 4 different camera feeds, simultaneously creating a command center that would have impressed any surveillance professional. The private security team from Elite Protection Services was stationed in an unmarked van 2 blocks away, ready to document everything with professional-grade equipment that would hold up in court. What I witnessed over the next 2 hours revealed the full extent of their calculated betrayal. Mom moved through my house with the confidence of an interior designer, rearranging my living room furniture to accommodate Danny's entertainment system. She pushed my reading chair into a corner and measured the space where his gaming setup would be installed. Dad worked methodically to install additional cable connections in what had been my home office drilling holes in the walls I had painted myself just 6 months earlier. But their conversation, captured clearly by my upgraded audio system, revealed something even more disturbing than furniture theft. They were rehearsing the lies they planned to tell me when I returned from my fake trip to Denver. When Larissa gets back on Sunday, we'll explain that Danny's situation became urgent. Mom said, stepping back to admire her rearrangement of my space. We'll say his landlord suddenly evicted him, and we had to make emergency arrangements. And if she threatens to kick him out? Dad asked, testing the cable connection he had just installed. Then we'll remind her that Danny has nowhere else to go and that good families don't abandon each other during crises. Mom replied smoothly. We'll make her feel guilty for even considering it. Besides, once he's been here a week and has mail coming to this address, she'll have no legal choice but to let him stay. The calculated nature of their manipulation was breathtaking. They had not only planned the illegal move-in, they had also prepared a complete narrative designed to trap me emotionally and legally into accepting the situation. Every detail had been considered, every potential objection had been anticipated, every emotional pressure point had been identified for exploitation. I watched Dad hang a framed photo of our family on my hallway wall, replacing a landscape painting I had chosen specifically for that spot. This will make it feel more like home for Danny, he said with satisfaction. The casual way he was redecorating my house, making permanent changes to suit someone else's comfort, felt like a violation almost as profound as the initial breaking and entering. Mom opened my kitchen cabinets and began clearing out space for Danny's dishes and food supplies. We'll need to make room in the refrigerator, too, she mused aloud, examining my organized shelves. Danny likes to keep energy drinks and leftover pizza. She started moving my carefully arranged pantry items to create storage space for my brother's preferences. But the conversation that made my anger surge beyond anything I had ever experienced came when Dad asked about Danny's financial responsibilities. Has he agreed to pay rent or utilities? Mom laughed dismissively. Robert, you know Danny doesn't have steady income right now. Larissa makes good money at that tech job. She can afford to support him while he gets back on his feet. They were not only moving him into my house without permission, they were also expecting me to financially support him indefinitely while he contributed nothing. Besides, Mom continued organizing my kitchen to her satisfaction. It's not like Larissa has expensive hobbies or a social life that costs money. This arrangement will be good for both of them. Danny gets stability and Larissa gets purpose. Taking care of family will make her feel needed. The condescending way she dismissed my life and autonomy as if my only value was providing support for my irresponsible brother cut deeper than any of their other manipulations. They had reduced me to nothing more than a resource to be exploited for Danny's benefit without considering my feelings, my plans, or my right to control my own living situation. As the evening progressed, I watched my parents transform my home into accommodation for someone I had never invited to live there. They moved my exercise equipment from the spare bedroom to the garage to make room for Danny's bed. They rearranged my bathroom cabinets to create space for his toiletries and medications. They even programmed my television with his favorite channels and gaming preferences. At 11:30 p.m., Dad pulled out a notepad and began documenting everything they had changed. "We'll need to remember what went where, so we can explain the improvements to Larissa," he said, photographing my furniture's new arrangement. "We'll frame it as us helping her organize and optimize her space." Mom nodded approvingly. "And we'll emphasize how much money she'll save by sharing utilities and groceries with Danny. We'll make it sound like we did her a favor by arranging this whole thing." The final insult came when I watched Mom hide a spare key in my kitchen junk drawer and text the location to someone. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. Danny had sent me a message. "Thanks for leaving a spare key in the kitchen drawer for me. It was really thoughtful of you to think of everything to make this transition smooth." My parents had not only given Danny unauthorized access to my house, they had also told him the key was a gesture of welcome from me. They were creating false evidence of my consent while making Danny believe I was actively facilitating his move-in. The psychological manipulation was so sophisticated that I had to admire their cunning, even while despising their methods. By midnight, my parents had finished their preparations and locked up my house using keys that would not work by morning. I had scheduled the locksmith for 6 a.m. Thursday, giving me just enough time to disable their access before the movers arrived. The trap was set perfectly with professional documentation of their criminal activity and clear evidence of their extensive deception. But I had one more surprise waiting for them that would turn their carefully planned invasion into a public humiliation they would never forget. Thursday morning dawned clear and cold as I sat in Madison's apartment, watching my security cameras with the focus of a military strategist. At exactly 6 a.m., I met the locksmith at my house and had all the locks changed in under 30 minutes. The old keys my parents and Danny possessed would now be completely useless, though they wouldn't discover this until it was too late to retreat gracefully. At 6:45 a.m., I returned to Madison's place and contacted Elite Protection Services to confirm their surveillance team was in position. Captain Morrison assured me that they had professional-grade recording equipment focused on my front door garage and all approaches to the house. Everything that happened would be documented with the clarity and detail necessary for legal proceedings. At 7 a.m. sharp, I watched a large moving truck from Reliable Moving Company rumble down my quiet street and park directly in front of my house. 3 professional movers in uniform shirts began unloading equipment while checking their work orders and clipboard of instructions. The violation of seeing strangers preparing to enter my house without my permission sent a surge of righteous anger through my chest. At 7:15 a.m., my parents arrived in Dad's pickup truck, looking confident and prepared to supervise the illegal operation they had spent weeks planning. I watched Mom stride up to my front door with the authority of someone who belonged there, pulling out her keys with practiced familiarity. The moment she inserted the key and realized it wouldn't turn was captured in perfect high-definition detail by my security cameras. The confusion on her face was immediately replaced by panic as she tried the key again, then examined it closely to make sure she had the right one. Dad joined her at the door, and they both began trying their keys repeatedly, their calm confidence rapidly dissolving into anxiety and frustration. "Maybe she changed the locks before leaving town," I heard Dad say through my audio system, though his voice carried doubt and growing concern. "Why would she do that? She knew we'd need access to supervise Danny's move." Mom replied, her tone shifting from confusion to irritation. The moving crew leader approached them with his clipboard. "Excuse me, folks, are you having trouble with the keys? We're on a pretty tight schedule this morning." His professional politeness highlighted the awkwardness of my parents' situation as they tried to explain why they couldn't access a house they claimed to have permission to enter. "There seems to be some confusion with the locks," Mom told the mover, maintaining her composure despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "Let me call the homeowner to clarify the situation." I watched her pull out her phone and dial my number, which I immediately declined. She tried calling again with the same result, and I could see her growing desperation as she realized their entire plan was falling apart before it had even begun. Dad tried calling me next, leaving a voicemail that I would later use as evidence of their deception. "Larissa, honey, There seems to be a problem with your locks. The movers are here for Danny's furniture, but our keys aren't working. Call me back as soon as possible so we can sort this out." The casual way he referred to Danny's furniture and our keys, as if both were perfectly normal aspects of a legitimate arrangement, demonstrated the depth of their self-deception. They had convinced themselves so thoroughly that their plan was justified that they couldn't even conceive of being caught and exposed. At 7:45 a.m., Danny arrived in his car loaded with personal belongings, immediately sensing that something was wrong. I watched him approach my parents with the enthusiasm of someone excited about starting a new chapter of his life, only to be met with their tense expressions and whispered conversations. "What's going on?" Danny asked, looking from my parents to the waiting movers. "Why isn't everything being moved inside?" "There's a small technical problem with the keys." Mom explained, her voice tight with controlled panic. "We're sorting it out right now." But Danny's expression was already changing from excitement to confusion and worry. Did something happen to Larissa? Is she okay? Maybe her flight was delayed and she's still in town? My heart ached watching Danny's genuine concern for my well-being, even as he stood on my doorstep, preparing to invade my home, based on lies my parents had told him. His confusion was so authentic, his worry so real, that I almost felt guilty about what I was about to put him through. At 8:15 a.m., the moving crew leader lost patience with the delay. "Look, folks, we've got 3 more jobs today and we're already behind schedule. If you can't provide access to the house, we're going to have to reschedule and charge you for the service call." That's when my parents' desperation became obvious, even to Danny. Mom began making increasingly frantic phone calls claiming she was trying to reach me, while Dad examined every window and door looking for alternative ways into the house. Their professional composure had completely dissolved, replaced by the behavior of people caught in a criminal act. "Maybe we should wait until Larissa gets back from her trip." Danny suggested tentatively, his discomfort with the situation becoming clear. "This doesn't feel right trying to move my stuff when she's not here to supervise." But Mom shut down his reasonable suggestion immediately. "Danny, your sister, specifically arranged for this to happen while she was traveling to avoid any inconvenience to her schedule. We can't disappoint her by changing plans at the last minute." Even in crisis, she was maintaining the fiction that I had requested and planned this entire arrangement. Her commitment to the lie was so absolute that I wondered if she had actually convinced herself it was true. That's when I made my final call to Captain Morrison. "It's time," I told him. "Bring the police back up and meet me at the house. Make sure they understand this is a breaking and entering in progress with multiple suspects and professional documentation of the crime." As I drove from Madison's apartment to my house, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger at my parents' betrayal, sympathy for Danny's confusion, and a deep sadness that family relationships I had treasured my entire life were about to be destroyed by their deception and manipulation. But I also felt something else, a fierce determination to protect my boundaries and my autonomy, no matter how much it cost me emotionally. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their destructive choices, even when confrontation feels like cruelty. The trap was about to spring shut and justice was finally about to be served. At exactly 11 a.m., I pulled into my driveway, followed immediately by 2 police officers in a marked patrol car and Captain Morrison in an unmarked vehicle. The sight of law enforcement arriving at what my parents thought was their private crime scene created the most satisfying moment of vindication I had ever experienced. My parents, Danny, and the 3 movers all turned to stare as we approached the front door. The confusion and shock on their faces was captured perfectly by Captain Morrison's handheld recording equipment, creating a permanent record of their reactions to being caught in the act. "Good morning," I said, calmly addressing the group as if I had stumbled upon a completely unexpected situation. "I'm Larissa Thompson, and this is my house. Can someone explain why there's a moving truck in my driveway and why people are attempting to enter my home?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face had gone completely white. Dad was opening and closing his mouth like a fish, gasping for air, and Danny looked like he had been struck by lightning. The movers immediately stepped back from the situation, recognizing law enforcement and sensing serious legal trouble. Larissa. Mom finally managed to speak, her voice artificially bright and cheerful. "What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in Denver for your business meetings?" Officer Martinez, one of the responding policemen, stepped forward with his notebook ready. "Ma'am, we received a report of attempted breaking and entering at this address. Are you the homeowner?" "Yes, I am," I replied, pulling out my driver's license and property deed as identification. "And I never gave anyone permission to enter my house or move belongings inside. I canceled my Denver trip specifically because I discovered this illegal activity was being planned." Danny found his voice first, his confusion and hurt obvious to everyone present. "Larissa, I don't understand. Mom and Dad said you invited me to stay here while you travel for work. They said you thought it would be good for both of us." The genuine pain in his voice made my anger toward my parents surge even higher. They had manipulated and deceived him just as much as they had betrayed me, using his trust and desperation to make him an unwitting accomplice in their scheme. "Danny, I never invited you to live here," I said gently but clearly. "I never offered you my house, I never agreed to any living arrangement, and I never asked our parents to coordinate anything on my behalf. They have been lying to both of us." Officer Rodriguez, the second policeman, asked to see the documentation Captain Morrison had prepared. As they reviewed the evidence, I pulled out my phone and showed Danny the photographs I had taken of Mom's moving plans and the detailed notes about converting my office into his bedroom. These were hidden in Mom's purse last Sunday. I explained, watching his expression change from confusion to understanding to betrayal. "They've been planning this for weeks without asking my permission or telling you the truth about my involvement." Dad finally attempted to defend their actions, his voice defensive and angry. "Larissa, we were just trying to help family. You have more space than you need, and Danny needed a place to stay. We thought you would understand once you saw how well the arrangement worked." Officer Martinez looked up from the documentation with a stern expression. "Sir, regardless of your family relationship or your intentions entering someone's home without permission and moving property inside constitutes breaking and entering under Texas law. The homeowner's family status doesn't change the legal definition of the crime." Captain Morrison presented the officers with a comprehensive file of evidence photographs of my parents entering my house repeatedly over the past month, recordings of their conversations, while rearranging my furniture documentation of the utility fraud and witness statements from neighbors about their false claims regarding my consent. "We have clear evidence of criminal trespass conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted theft of services," Captain Morrison explained. "The suspects have been under surveillance since yesterday evening, and we have recorded documentation of the entire criminal operation." Susan began crying, finally abandoning the pretense that their actions had been justified. "We didn't know what else to do. Danny needed help, and we can't afford to support him indefinitely. We thought Larissa would eventually understand that family has to take care of family." But her tears didn't move me the way they once might have. "You could have asked me directly," I said firmly. "You could have explained Danny's situation and requested my help honestly. Instead, you chose to lie, manipulate, and violate my privacy and property rights. You made both Danny and me victims of your deception." Danny stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion. "Larissa, I had no idea they were lying to you. I really believed you had offered to help me. I would never have agreed to this if I had known you weren't involved in planning it." The sincerity in his voice and the genuine remorse in his expression began to shift my feelings toward him. Danny wasn't the villain in this situation. He was another victim of our parents' manipulation and control. Officer Martinez addressed the group officially. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You are being charged with criminal trespass conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted theft of services. But before they could begin the arrest process, I held up my hand. Officers, I'd like to offer an alternative resolution if my family is willing to cooperate fully. I turned to face my parents directly, my voice steady and clear. You have two choices. Danny can remove all his belongings from my garage immediately. You can both agree to attend family counseling, and we can resolve this without criminal charges. Or I can press full charges against all three of you and let the legal system handle everything. The relief on Danny's face was immediate and obvious. Larissa, I'll get everything out right now. I'll call some friends to help me move the boxes back to Mom and Dad's place. I never wanted to cause you any trouble. But Mom tried one last manipulation. Larissa, think about what you're doing. We're your family. You can't seriously consider having us arrested over a misunderstanding about living arrangements. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I replied firmly. This was a calculated deception that violated my privacy, my property rights, and my trust. You planned this for weeks, lied to multiple people, committed fraud with my utility company, and manipulated both Danny and me to serve your own purposes. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward with handcuffs ready. Ma'am, what's your decision? Are you pressing charges or accepting their cooperation? I looked at Danny's frightened, remorseful face, then at my parents' mixture of defiance and desperation. I'll accept their cooperation, but with strict conditions that will be legally documented and enforced. The choice was made, but the reckoning was far from over. What happened next transformed not just that morning, but the entire dynamic of my family relationships in ways I could never have anticipated. Danny immediately took charge of removing his belongings from my garage, calling two friends who arrived within an hour to help load everything back into the moving truck. His shame and embarrassment were obvious, but so was his genuine remorse for being used as a pawn in our parents' deception. As we watched the movers reload Danny's furniture under police supervision, he pulled me aside for a private conversation that changed everything between us. Larissa, I need you to know something that I've never admitted to anyone before. He said, his voice thick with emotion. Our parents have been manipulating me my entire adult life, and I was too dependent on them to see it clearly until today. What Danny revealed over the next 20 minutes was a pattern of emotional manipulation and financial control that had kept him trapped in cycles of failure and dependence. Every time he had tried to become truly independent, our parents had sabotaged his efforts through manufactured crises, guilt trips, and false emergencies that required him to abandon his plans and return to their support. The gambling problem that cost me so much money, Danny explained, his voice filled with shame. It started because Dad kept taking me to casinos and encouraging me to bet larger amounts, saying it was our special bonding time. When I lost big, they would loan me money to cover the losses, then use my debt to them as leverage to control my decisions. My heart broke as I realized that Danny had been as much a victim of their manipulation as I had been, just in different ways. They had kept him financially dependent and emotionally insecure to maintain control over his life, while simultaneously using his failures to justify manipulating me into supporting him. I was actually excited about living with you because I thought it might finally give me a chance to become truly independent. Danny continued. I thought if I could save money and get stable while house-sitting for you, I might finally be able to break free from their control and build a real life for myself. That's when I made a decision that surprised everyone present, including myself. I turned to Officer Martinez and asked, if I were to offer my brother a legitimate short-term housing arrangement with clear legal boundaries, would that resolve the criminal aspects of this situation? After conferring with Captain Morrison and reviewing the evidence, Officer Martinez agreed that voluntary cooperation would satisfy the legal requirements provided that formal documentation was created, and my parents agreed to specific conditions. I looked at Danny seriously. I'm going to offer you something genuine that our parents tried to fake. You can stay in my guest room for exactly 30 days while you find a job and secure your own apartment. But this comes with a written agreement, clear boundaries, and absolute honesty between us about everything. Danny's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and relief. "Larissa, I would be honored to accept those terms, and I promise I'll use this opportunity to finally become the independent, responsible adult I should have been years ago." Madison, who had arrived during the confrontation, helped us draft a temporary housing agreement on the spot. Danny would pay $200 per week for room and board, would actively job search every day, and would move out within 30 days, regardless of his employment status. Most importantly, our parents would have no input into the arrangement and would not be welcome in my house during this trial period. Susan tried to object to being excluded from the arrangement, but Officer Rodriguez made it clear that she was in no position to negotiate terms. "Ma'am, you're avoiding criminal prosecution only because your daughter is being extraordinarily generous. I suggest you accept whatever conditions she sets without argument." The most satisfying moment came when I handed my parents a list of non-negotiable requirements for any future relationship. They would attend family counseling sessions for at least 3 months. They would respect my boundaries about visits and communication. They would stop trying to control or manipulate either Danny's or my life decisions, and they would acknowledge in writing that their actions had been inappropriate and harmful. "If you violate any of these conditions," I said firmly, "I will immediately press full criminal charges for everything you did, and I will cut off contact permanently. This is your only chance to rebuild a healthy relationship with both your children." Robert's response surprised me with its humility. "Larissa, you have every right to be angry with us, and you're being more fair than we deserve. We'll do whatever counseling requires and work to earn back your trust, even if it takes years." But Susan's reaction revealed how deeply ingrained her controlling patterns actually were. "This seems like an extreme overreaction to a family disagreement about living arrangements," she said stiffly. "I think you're being influenced by your friend and these police officers to see this situation as more serious than it really is." Officer Martinez addressed her directly. "Ma'am, what happened here today wasn't a family disagreement. It was criminal activity that could have resulted in multiple felony charges. Your daughter is showing remarkable restraint and generosity by offering you a path forward instead of prosecution." The wake-up call was harsh, but necessary. Over the following weeks, Danny threw himself into job searching with a determination and focus I had never seen from him before. He applied for positions every day, went to interviews in borrowed clothes, and even took a temporary construction job that started the Monday after our confrontation. More importantly, he began attending counseling sessions to address the psychological patterns that had kept him dependent and vulnerable to manipulation. "I'm learning that independence isn't just about having your own apartment," he told me during one of our evening conversations. "It's about making decisions based on your own values and goals, instead of trying to please people who use their approval as a weapon." 3 weeks after moving into my guest room, Danny received a job offer from a local construction company that offered benefits and opportunities for advancement. His excitement was genuine and infectious, and I realized I was seeing my brother's authentic personality for the first time in years. "Larissa, I can't thank you enough for giving me this chance to prove myself," he said the night before starting his new job. "But more than that, thank you for forcing me to see how our parents were using me and controlling both of us. I don't think I ever would have recognized the manipulation without this crisis." On the day Danny moved into his own studio apartment exactly 28 days after our confrontation, he hosted a small housewarming party that included me, Madison, and 2 coworkers who had become genuine friends. Watching him proudly show off his modest but independent living space, I felt a happiness I hadn't experienced since childhood. Our parents' journey toward accountability was slower and more difficult. The counseling sessions forced them to confront decades of controlling behavior and emotional manipulation that had damaged both their children. Susan in particular struggled to accept that her helpful interventions had actually been harmful intrusions that prevented us from developing healthy independence. But gradual progress did occur. 6 months after our confrontation, we were able to have family dinners again, though with clear boundaries about topics and behavior. Robert had developed genuine insight into how his enabling of Susan's controlling tendencies had created toxic family dynamics, and he began actively supporting our independence instead of undermining it. Susan's transformation was more limited but still meaningful. She learned to ask before offering advice, to respect our decisions even when she disagreed with them, and to find fulfillment in her own life instead of trying to control ours. The relationship remained somewhat formal and careful, but it was honest in a way it had never been before. 1 year later, Danny was promoted to crew supervisor at his construction job and had saved enough money to move into a larger apartment. His confidence and maturity had grown tremendously, and our relationship had become closer and healthier than it had ever been during our childhood. The best thing about this whole experience, Danny told me during his promotion celebration dinner, was learning that real family support means helping people become independent and confident, not keeping them dependent and insecure. What our parents tried to do to us was the opposite of love, even though they convinced themselves it was helpful. The life lesson that emerged from this painful experience was profound and transformative. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is refuse to enable their destructive patterns, even when confrontation creates temporary pain and conflict. True family support means helping people develop independence, confidence, and healthy boundaries, not creating relationships based on manipulation, guilt, and control. By standing up to my parents' deception and offering Danny genuine help with clear boundaries, I not only protected my own autonomy, but also freed him from a cycle of dependence that had stunted his growth for years. The crisis that could have destroyed our family relationships ultimately made them stronger and more honest than they had ever been. Now, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever experienced family members who tried to manipulate or control your life decisions through deception or emotional pressure? How did you handle the situation, and what did you learn about setting healthy boundaries with people you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and creating healthy relationships. Sharing this video might help someone else who's dealing with similar family manipulation recognize the patterns and find the courage to protect their boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own family challenges with wisdom and strength.